So today I'm going to be reading a bit from this book here. And this book is The Fundamentals of Nursing, Concepts, Process, and Practice. So this is an older edition of this book. You can see it is a very large book. Fundamentals of Nursing. Okay. So when we open up the book, we see all of the different units, and I will first list all of the units, and there's a lot of information in this book. Each unit has multiple chapters, as you can see. So there are 50 chapters in this book. Okay. So Unit 1 is titled The Nature of Nursing. Unit 2 is titled Contemporary Health Care. Unit 3 is titled Health Beliefs and Practices. Unit 4 is titled The Nursing Process. Unit 5 is titled Lifespan Development. Unit 7 is titled Assessing Health. Unit 8 is titled Integral Components of Client Care. Unit 9 is titled Promoting Psychosocial Health. Unit 10 is titled Promotion Physiologic Health. And that is the final unit. So there's a lot to choose from. But I'm going to come back here to Unit 7, Assessing Health. And I'm going to be reading part of Chapter 27, which is all about vital signs and assessing vital signs. Okay, so we're going to talk about body temperature, and we'll see how far we can get into that, because this chapter includes very detailed information about assessing body temperature, assessing a peripheral pulse, assessing an apical pulse, assessing an apical radial pulse, assessing respirations, assessing blood pressure, and measuring oxygen saturation. Okay, so this is on page, starting at page 483. Let's see. Okay. Assessing Health, Unit 7. Assessment is an interactive process of information gathering and analysis that nurses carry out to identify client strengths and actual and potential health problems, and to evaluate effectiveness of care. A comprehensive assessment includes data about a client's psychosocial, spiritual, cultural, environmental, and developmental status, as well as physiologic health. Nurses also regularly perform focused assessments as indicated by client needs. So we'll start at the beginning and we'll see how far we get. Okay. So learning outcomes here. After completing this chapter, you will be able to describe factors that affect the vital signs and accurate measurement of them. Identify the normal ranges for each vital sign. Identify the variations in normal body temperature, pulse, respirations, and blood pressure that occur from infancy to old age. Describe factors influencing the body's heat production and loss. Compare oral, tympanic, rectal, and axillary methods of measuring body temperature. Describe appropriate nursing care for alterations in body temperature. Identify 9 sites used to assess the pulse and state the reasons for their use. List the characteristics that should be included when assessing pulses. Explain how to measure the apical pulse and the apical radial pulse. Describe the mechanics of breathing and the mechanisms that control respirations. Identify the components of a respiratory assessment. Differentiate systolic from diastolic blood pressure. Describe 5 phases of Korotkop's sounds. Describe various methods and sites used to measure blood pressure. Discuss measurement of blood oxygenation using pulse oximetry. And lastly, identify when it is appropriate to delegate measurement of vital signs to unlicensed assistive personnel. Okay. So here is a table that gives normal range and vital signs by age, and goes from newborns to 1 year, 5 to 8 years, 10 years, teen, adult, and older adult, as the vital signs fall within different ranges, normal ranges for each age group. Okay, so each vital sign, temperature, pulse, respirations, and blood pressure have different normal values for different age groups. Okay. So the vital or cardinal signs are body temperature, pulse, respirations, and blood pressure. Recently, many agencies, such as Veterans Administration, have designated pain as a 5th vital sign to be assessed at the same time as each of the other 4. Pain assessment is covered in a different chapter. Pulse oximetry is also commonly measured on the same time as the traditional vital signs. These vital signs, which should be looked at in total, are checked to monitor the functions of the body. The signs reflect changes in function that otherwise might not be observed. Monitoring a client's vital signs should not be an automatic or routine procedure. It should be thoughtful, scientific assessment. Vital signs, which should be evaluated with reference to the client's present and prior health status, are compared to the client's usual, if known, and accepted normal standards. Okay, so let's come down to body temperature. Body temperature reflects the balance between the heat produced and the heat lost from the body, measured in heat units called degrees. There are 2 kinds of body temperature: core temperature and surface temperature. Core temperature is the temperature of the deep tissues of the body, such as the abdominal cavity and pelvic cavity. It remains relatively constant. Let's see. The core body temperature is a range of temperatures. The surface temperature is the temperature of the skin, the subcutaneous tissue, and fat. It, by contrast, rises and falls in response to the environment. The body continually produces heat as a byproduct of metabolism. When the amount of heat produced by the body equals the amount of heat lost, the person is in heat balance. A number of factors affect the body's heat production. The most important are these 5. Number 1, basal metabolic rate. The basal metabolic rate is the rate of energy utilization in the body required to maintain essential activities such as breathing. Metabolic rates decrease with age. In general, the younger the person, the higher the BMR, or basal metabolic rate. Number 2, muscle activity. Muscle activity, including shivering, increases the metabolic rate. Okay, number 3, thyroxine output. Increased thyroxine output increases the rate of cellular metabolism throughout the body. This effect is called chemical thermogenesis, the stimulation of heat production in the body through increased cellular metabolism. Number 4, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and sympathetic stimulation. These hormones immediately increase the rate of cellular metabolism in many body tissues. Epinephrine and norepinephrine directly affect liver and muscle cells, thereby increasing cellular metabolism. And number 5, fever. Fever increases the cellular metabolic rate and thus increases the body's temperature further. Heat is lost from the body through radiation, conduction, convection, and vaporization. Radiation is the transfer of heat from the surface of one object to the surface of another without contact between the two objects, mostly in the form of infrared rays. For example, radiation accounts for 60% of the heat lost by a nude person standing in a room at normal room temperature. Okay. Conduction is the transfer of heat from one molecule to a molecule of lower temperature. Conductive transfer cannot take place without contact between the molecules and normally accounts for minimal heat loss, except, for example, when a body is immersed in cold water. The amount of heat transferred depends on the temperature difference and the amount and duration of the contact. Convection is the dispersion of heat by air currents. The body usually has a small amount of warm air adjacent to it. This warm air rises and is replaced by cooler air, and so people always lose a small amount of heat through convection. Lastly, vaporization is continuous evaporation of moisture from the respiratory tract and from the mucosa of the mouth and from the skin. This continuous and unnoticed water loss is called insensible water loss, and the accompanying heat loss is called insensible heat loss. Insensible heat loss accounts for about 10% of basal heat loss. When the body temperature increases, vaporization accounts for greater heat loss. So here this section is titled Regulation of Body Temperature. The system that regulates body temperature has three main parts: sensors in the shell and in the core, an integrator in the hypothalamus, and an effector system that adjusts the production and loss of heat. Most sensors or sensory receptors are in the skin. The skin has more receptors for cold than warmth. Therefore, skin sensors detect cold more efficiently than warmth. When the skin becomes chilled over the entire body, three physiologic processes to increase the body temperature take place. Number 1, shivering increases heat production. Number 2, sweating is inhibited to decrease heat loss. And number 3, vasoconstriction decreases heat loss. The hypothalamic integrator, the center that controls the core temperature, is located in the preoptic area of the hypothalamus. When the sensors in the hypothalamus detect heat, they send out signals intended to reduce the temperature. That is, to decrease heat production and increase heat loss. When the cold sensors are stimulated, signals are sent out to increase heat production and decrease heat loss. The signals from the cold sensitive receptors of the hypothalamus initiate effectors such as vasoconstriction, shivering, and the release of epinephrine, which increases cellular metabolism and hence heat production. When the warmth-sensitive receptors in the hypothalamus are stimulated, the effector system sends out signals that initiate sweating and peripheral vasodilatation. Also, when this system is stimulated, the person consciously makes appropriate adjustments, such as putting on additional clothing in response to cold or turning on a fan in response to heat. Factors affecting body temperature. Nurses should be aware of the factors that can affect a client's body temperature so that they can recognize normal temperature variations and understand the significance of body temperature measurements that deviate from normal. Among the factors that affect body temperature are the following. Number 1, age. The infant is greatly influenced by the temperature of the environment and must be protected from extreme changes. Children's temperatures continue to be more variable than those of adults until puberty. Many older people, particularly those over 75 years old, are at risk of hypothermia for a variety of reasons, such as inadequate diet, loss of subcutaneous fat, lack of activity, and reduced thermoregulatory efficiency. Older people are also particularly sensitive to extremes in the environmental temperature due to decreased thermoregulatory controls. Number 2, diurnal variations or circadian rhythms. Body temperatures normally change throughout the day, varying as much as 1 degree Celsius between the early morning and the late afternoon. The point of highest body temperature is usually reached between 8 o'clock and midnight, and the lowest point is reached during sleep between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m. And number 3, exercise. Hard work or strenuous exercise can increase body temperature to as high as 38.3 to 40 degrees Celsius. Then it just shows a normal range here of temperature variation throughout the day. Then over here we have number 4, hormones. Women usually experience more hormone fluctuations than men. In women, progesterone secretion at the time of ovulation raises body temperature by about 0.3 to 0.6 degrees above basal temperature. Number 5 is stress. Stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system can increase the production of epinephrine and norepinephrine, thereby increasing metabolic activity and heat production. Nurses may anticipate that a highly stressed or anxious client could have an elevated body temperature for that reason. And then we have number 6 is environment. Extremes in environmental temperatures can affect a person's temperature regulatory systems. If the temperature is assessed in a very warm room and the body temperature cannot be modified by convection, conduction, or radiation, the temperature will be elevated. Similarly, if the client has been outside in extremely cold weather without suitable clothing, the body temperature may be low. And the next section here is titled Alterations in Body Temperature. There are 2 primary alterations in body temperature: pyrexia and hypothermia. Pyrexia. A body temperature above the usual range is called pyrexia, hyperthermia, or fever. A very high fever, such as 41 degrees Celsius or 105.8 Fahrenheit, is called hyperpyrexia. Okay, there's a thermometer there. Let's see. The client who has a fever is referred to as febrile. The one who has not is afebrile. 4 common types of fevers are intermittent, remittent, relapsing, and constant. During an intermittent fever, the body temperature alternates at regular intervals between periods of fever and periods of normal or subnormal temperatures. During a remittent fever, a wide range of temperature fluctuations occurs over the 24-hour period, all of which are above normal. In a relapsing fever, short febrile periods of a few days are interspersed with periods of 1 or 2 days of normal temperature. And during a constant fever, the body temperature fluctuates minimally, but always remains above normal. The temperature that rises to fever level rapidly following a normal temperature and then returns to normal within a few hours is called a fever spike. It says the clinical signs of fever vary with the onset, course, and abatement stages of the fever. And there's a box over here describing the different clinical signs of fever. These signs occur as a result of changes in the set point of the temperature control mechanism regulated by the hypothalamus. Under normal conditions, whenever the core temperature rises above 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 Fahrenheit, the rate of heat loss is increased, resulting in a fall in temperature toward the set point level. Conversely, when the core temperature falls below 37 or 98.6, the rate of heat production is increased, resulting in a rise in temperature toward the set point. In a fever, however, the set point of the hypothalamic thermostat changes suddenly from the normal level to a higher than normal value as a result of the effects of the tissue destruction, pyrogenic substances, or dehydration on the hypothalamus. Although the set point changes rapidly, the core body temperature reaches this new set point only after several hours. During this interval, the usual heat production responses that cause elevation of the body temperature occur: chills, feeling of coldness, cold skin due to vasoconstriction, and shivering. When the core temperature reaches the new set point, the person feels neither cold nor hot and no longer experiences chills. Depending on the degree of temperature elevation, other signs may occur during the course of the fever. Very high temperatures, such as 41 to 42 or 106 to 108, damage the parenchyma of cells throughout the body, particularly in the brain, where destruction of neuronal cells is irreversible. Damage to the liver, kidneys, and other body organs can also be great enough to disrupt functioning and eventually cause death. When the cause of the high temperature is suddenly removed, the set point of the hypothalamic thermostat is suddenly reduced to a lower value, perhaps even back to the original normal level. In this instance, the hypothalamus now attempts to lower the temperature to 37 degrees, and the usual heat loss responses causing a reduction of the body temperature occur: excessive sweating and hot, flushed skin due to sudden vasodilatation. This sudden change of events is known as the crisis, the flush, or the defervescent stage of a pyrexic condition. And let's see. Nursing interventions for a client who has a fever are designed to support the body's normal physiologic processes, provide comfort, and prevent complications. During the course of the fever, the nurse needs to monitor the client's vital signs closely. Nursing measures during the chill phase are designed to help the client decrease heat loss. At this time, the body's physiological processes are attempting to raise the core temperature to the new set point temperature. During the flush or crisis phase, the body processes are attempting to lower the core temperature to the reduced or normal set point temperature. At this time, the nurse takes measures to increase heat loss and decrease heat production. And there's a table right here listing nursing interventions for clients with fever. Then we can get into hypothermia, which is when the core body temperature is below the lower limit of normal. And also it gets into hyperthermia. And so we can go over this little table here, the clinical signs of fever. Okay, so at the onset or the cold or chill stage, some symptoms include increased heart rate, increased respiratory rate and depth, shivering, pallid, cold skin, complaints of feeling cold, cyanotic nail beds, goose flesh appearance of the skin, cessation of sweating. And then some symptoms over the course of a fever: the absence of chills, skin that feels warm, photosensitivity, glassy-eyed appearance, increased pulse and respiratory rates, increased thirst, mild to severe dehydration, drowsiness, restlessness, delirium or convulsions, herpetic lesions of the mouth, loss of appetite, malaise, weakness, and aching muscles. And then at the defervescence stage of a fever, skin that appears flushed and feels warm, sweating, decreased shivering, and possible dehydration. Okay, so here are some nursing interventions for clients with fever. Monitor vital signs, assess skin color and temperature, monitor white blood cell count, hematocrit value, and other pertinent laboratory reports for indications of infection or dehydration. Remove excess blankets when the client feels warm, but provide extra warmth when the client feels chilled. Provide adequate nutrition and fluids to meet the increased metabolic demands and prevent dehydration. Monitor and measure intake and output. Reduce physical activity to limit heat production, especially during the flush stage. Administer antipyretics as ordered. provide oral hygiene to keep the mucous membranes moist, provide a tepid sponge bath to increase heat loss through conduction, provide dry clothing and bed linens. Okay, then we have the clinical signs of hypothermia, which is decreased body temperature, pulse, and respirations, severe shivering, feelings of cold and chills, pale, cool, waxy skin, hypotension, decreased urinary output, lack of muscle coordination, disorientation, drowsiness progressing to coma. And some nursing interventions for clients with hypothermia: provide a warm environment, provide dry clothing, apply warm blankets, keep limbs close to the body, cover the client's scalp with a cap or turban, supply warm oral or intravenous fluids, apply warming pads. Okay, then we go into different ways to assess body temperature, different types of thermometers. Still different types of thermometers. Okay, just gives more examples with pictures. And the next section goes into assessing the pulse or the heart rate. Okay, so I think that's all that I'll read for today. Okay, but you can see this is a very large book. So I just wanted to choose something a little bit simple this time. Okay, so thank you for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed.